Hello, and welcome to this thought for today. And when I was thinking about what to say, I found myself thinking of war and peace. And as I thought, that is the book. And as I thought a bit more about it, I realised that it's almost 50 years since I first read it. And I thought, good grief, it's getting back in time to when Tolstoy wrote it, almost. But it was when I was a young teacher in a country town, a remote country town. It took about 6 hours of solid driving to get there, very isolated. And I remembered the salt piles on the sides of the road at parts and the occasional tumbleweed that would blow across the road and the locust swarms which would sometimes batter my old VW. And I thought as I remembered that it was a good practice for lockdown, really. Well, one part of War and Peace that I especially remember, and some of the details may be wrong, but the substance of it is true, was a part when the story was unfolding when the Napoleon was advancing on Moscow, and the rich of the city were trying to flee. It was not only the rich that were trying to flee, the aristocrats, but also the poor. Everybody was trying to flee, just that the rich had a few more possessions to take with them. I think it was winter time and it's very cold and it's been raining and soggy snow around. And one of the central characters, Count Pierre, and his household are trying to pack up and leave their mansion. And the servants are frantically piling things on the wagons, possessions building up, chests of fine clothing, paintings, even a grand piano, as I recall, being loaded on top of a wagon. And there's chaos all around. And Pierre's elderly mother is almost hysterical, shrieking as precious belongings fall to the ground and are trampled into the mud, with the growing realization that much will have to be left behind to the invading troops. The wagons are piled high, poor people are begging to be taken on board, and the servants, household servants, desperately beat them off. Pierre's rich mother weeps as she sees her privileged lifestyle disintegrating, a life gone now for a very uncertain future. And for her, the root of the problem really is the gap that's unfolding now between having so much and having it suddenly taken away and facing a very uncertain future. For there's been nothing in all of her pampered life that has equipped her to deal with this catastrophe. And the extraordinary thing is that Tolstoy, with his great heart and artistry, whilst allowing us to see this feckless, selfish old woman as she really is, manages to make us feel compassion for her. I think it was Tolstoy, wasn't it, who said, to understand all is to forgive all. But it's the relative change and its suddenness that she struggles with, just as we find ourselves in the same sort of place ourselves at present. Yet it is all relative, as we realise on occasion that our relative situation in Australia is much, much better than it is for many other people in other parts of the world. Reminders we get from time to time, such as when I heard Waleed Ali on the radio recently talking about places where there is such overcrowding and poverty overseas that people can only find spatial isolation by living in trees. And similarly, a similar reminder for me was yesterday reading in the paper about the 75th anniversary of VP Day, victory in the Pacific, the end of the war in the Pacific, the surrender of the Japanese, and the story of the last remaining survivor of the notorious Ambon prisoner of war camp, 99-year-old Max Eddie Gilbert, who was a prisoner at the camp for some 4.5 years, and asked how he was able to survive that appalling experience. He said, he replied, "You just have to go on. One day at a time," it seemed, was what had got him through. I learnt in the article somehow too this remarkable man, but it took him some 20 years, was able to forgive his captors and find some peace. Well, today truly I acknowledge to myself as much as to you, for there is a need that we have many blessings which we can so easily forget, and not to be discomforted, thrown adrift by the changes from our former state of even perhaps complacency and taking so much for granted. But so important in our faith, for our faith is what is at peril, I think, if we are thrown adrift, of course. Can we acknowledge each day the many blessings that we have? This, it seems, is a key to finding God's presence and creativity in our lives and how we cope as we take one day at a time. So may God's blessings be on us all the coming week as we travel through all of this time. Amen.